The first thing Elara heard after being exiled was the sound of the kingdom's gates closing behind her. The second was a child crying. She stopped beneath the falling snow. Slowly, she turned. Nothing. Only darkness. Only the enormous stone walls of Moonfang disappearing behind the storm. She had been stripped of her royal cloak, branded a traitor, and thrown beyond the border with nothing but a torn dress, a small satchel, and enough food to survive 2 days. The king had not even looked at her when he sentenced her. King Kaelen, the man whose presence made her wolf tremble, the man she had secretly believed might one day see through the lies. He had chosen the court. He had chosen the crown. He had chosen to believe she was dangerous. So Elara forced herself to keep walking. But behind the fortress walls, 3 small figures slipped through a servant's passage. 3 young Alpha Cubs. 3 heirs to the Moonfang throne. And 3 children who had decided that if the kingdom wanted Elara gone, they would go with her. By the time the first guard noticed their beds were empty, Elara was already standing beneath the ancient trees of the Forbidden Forest. She thought she had lost everything. Then 3 little wolves stepped out of the snow. And one of them whispered the words that would change the fate of the entire kingdom. "We came with you." Snow fell like ash over Moonfang. It covered the black roofs of the fortress, gathered along the stone battlements, and softened the thousands of footprints surrounding the royal courtyard. But it could not soften the silence. Elara stood alone in the center of that silence. Her wrists were free, yet she felt more imprisoned than she ever had inside the castle. A torn gray dress clung to her body beneath the winter wind. The royal cloak that had once marked her as a servant of the healing wing had been taken from her shoulders moments earlier. Her hands were cold. Her lips were numb. But none of it compared to the emptiness inside her chest. Across the courtyard, upon the raised black stone platform, sat King Kaelen. He looked exactly as the kingdom expected its Alpha King to look. Untouchable. Powerful. Cold. His dark hair moved slightly in the wind, while the silver clasp of his royal coat caught the pale morning light. His expression revealed nothing. Not anger. Not pity. Not hesitation. Elara stared at him anyway. For one impossible second, she searched his face for the man she had occasionally glimpsed when no one else was watching. The exhausted ruler who sometimes stood alone beside the palace windows. The father who had once carried a feverish cub through the healing wing at midnight. The wounded man whose wolf had grown strangely calm whenever Elara was near. She had thought there was something between them. Not love. Not yet. Something more dangerous. Recognition. A pull neither of them understood. But today, that invisible thread felt like it had been cut. The royal council stood behind Kaelen. Lady Seraphine was among them. Elegant. Motionless. Perfectly composed. Her eyes met Elara's. There was something almost gentle in her smile. That was what frightened Elara most. She knew the evidence against her was false. The forged letter. The missing royal medicine. The witness who claimed Elara had been seen near the prince's chambers. Every piece had been arranged perfectly. Too perfectly. But Elara had no proof. And in Moonfang, an Omega, without political protection, had no voice against a royal council. Kaelen rose. The courtyard became utterly still. "Elara of the healing wing," he said. His voice was deep enough to make the soldiers straighten. "You have been found guilty of betraying the royal family." The words entered her like ice. Elara swallowed. She wanted to ask him why. She wanted to scream that she had spent years protecting his children. She wanted to tell him about the nights she had stayed awake beside the youngest cub when nightmares made him howl. She wanted to remind Kaelen that she had never once asked for anything from him. Not a title. Not gold. Not even gratitude. Only trust. But the king's eyes remained distant. "Your sentence is exile." A murmur moved through the courtyard. Elara lowered her gaze. Something inside her finally broke. Not loudly. There was no dramatic cry. Only the quiet realization that she had been hoping for a man who had already decided she was disposable. The guards approached. One pulled the last piece of royal fabric from her shoulders. The cold struck immediately. Elara stepped forward. Then another. The great gates opened. Beyond them waited an endless, white wilderness. She crossed the threshold without looking back. But 3 floors above the courtyard, 3 small faces pressed against a narrow window. The cubs had watched everything. The oldest, Rowan, clenched his tiny fists. Beside him stood Lucian and the youngest, little Aiden. They knew Elara, not the traitor the court described. Their Elara. The woman who had smuggled honey cakes into their room. The woman who had sung quietly when thunder frightened them. The woman who never laughed when their wolves behaved badly. Aiden's eyes filled with tears. She's leaving. Rowan looked toward the guards. Then toward the servants' corridor. We're going after her. Lucian's face went pale. We'll get punished. Rowan stared at the window. She got punished for nothing. That was enough. Minutes later, 3 little figures disappeared through a servant's passage. Outside the walls, Elara walked until the fortress became a dark shape behind the snow. Her legs began shaking. She had not eaten since the previous evening. She had barely slept. Still, she forced herself toward the northern forest. The forbidden forest. The one place even royal hunters avoided. At its edge stood an ancient tree split by lightning. Elara reached it. Then her knees gave way. She sank against the trunk, covering her face with both hands. For the first time since the trial began, she allowed herself to cry. I didn't do it. Her voice vanished beneath the wind. I didn't betray them. Silence answered. Elara closed her eyes. Maybe the kingdom had never wanted her. Maybe Kaelen had never truly seen her. Maybe she had been foolish to believe otherwise. Then, crunch. A tiny footstep pressed into the snow. Elara froze. Another. Then another. She slowly lifted her head. 3 small wolves stood between the trees. White breath curled from their noses. Their eyes were familiar. Impossible. Elara rose unsteadily. No. The oldest cub stepped forward. Elara. Her heart stopped. Behind them, Moonfang remained unaware. The kingdom had just lost its 3 heirs. And something in the forest had already heard them arrive. A howl rolled through the darkness. Then another answered from much closer. For several seconds, Elara could not move. She simply stared at the 3 cubs standing before her. Snow clung to their fur. Their tiny paws were already turning red from the cold. Aiden trembled. Elara rushed toward them. What were you thinking? Her voice cracked between fear and anger. She dropped to her knees and pulled the youngest against her chest. You cannot be here. Aiden buried his face against her shoulder. We didn't want you to be alone. Those words nearly destroyed her. Elara looked at Rowan. He tried to appear brave. But he was still a child. His ears were flattened. His body was shaking. Lucian stood beside him, trying desperately not to cry. Elara understood immediately. They had not come because they were rebellious. They had come because they loved her. And that made everything worse. If the guards find you, she couldn't finish. Kaelen would tear the kingdom apart. The entire pack would search the mountains. And when they discovered Elara with the missing heirs, every lie Seraphine had told would suddenly become believable. Kidnapper. Traitor. Enemy. Elara pressed her forehead against Aiden's. We have to go back. The 3 cubs stepped backward. No, Rowan said. You don't understand. We do. His voice shook. They hurt you. Elara closed her eyes. There was no time to argue. The cold was becoming dangerous. She carried Aiden while the older 2 followed her into the ruins of an abandoned hunter's lodge. The roof was half collapsed. Snow covered the floor, but there was enough stone around the old fireplace to block the wind. Elara gathered dead branches and made a tiny fire. The cubs curled together. Aiden's trembling became worse. Elara touched his forehead. Too cold. She pulled him closer. Then she felt it. A strange warmth moved from her palm into his body. A silver glow appeared beneath her skin. Elara stared. The light spread through Aiden's fur. His breathing slowed. His wolf relaxed. Then Rowan gasped. The same silver shimmer appeared beneath his chest. Lucian's followed. Elara pulled her hand away. The glow disappeared. Her breathing quickened. Her healing ability had never done that. It had always worked on wounds. broken bones.
Fever. Pain.
Never on the wolf itself. And never like this. The 3 cubs became completely calm. Their eyes closed. Elara whispered to herself. What are you? She did not know that far away, inside Moonfang, the king was asking the same question. The royal nursery door burst open. A guard froze. 3 beds. Empty. Blankets thrown aside. The windows were sealed. The chamber doors had remained guarded all night. Yet the heirs were gone. The alarm bells began ringing.
1, 2,
3. Then the entire fortress erupted. Kaelen arrived in seconds. He looked at the empty beds. For the first time in years, the king's composure shattered. Where are they? No one answered. His alpha aura exploded across the chamber. Several guards dropped to their knees. Find them. His voice was almost a growl. Every gate, every road, every forest. Lady Seraphine arrived moments later. She looked horrified. Perfectly horrified. But behind her expression, something cold calculated the possibilities. Then a soldier entered carrying a torn piece of gray fabric. Your Majesty. Kaelen stared at it.
He knew the cloth.
Elara's cloak. Seraphine lowered her gaze. I feared this. Kaelen's eyes snapped toward her. What? She hesitated. Just long enough. Perhaps she took them. The room went silent. Kaelen's jaw tightened.
No.
Seraphine looked surprised. You don't believe she could? I said no. But then the soldier spoke. Your Majesty, the northern gate was opened shortly after the Omega's exile. Kaelen's face changed. Fear replaced anger. He turned toward the window. The northern forest. Elara. The cubs. Something connected them. He hated the thought. But he hated the possibility of losing his children more. Prepare my horse. Within minutes, Kaelen rode into the storm. Back in the forest, Elara had finally managed to warm the cubs. She looked toward the entrance. Something was wrong. She had heard movement. Not human. Not wolf. She stepped outside. Snow covered the ground. At first, there was nothing. Then she saw the tracks. Huge.
Deep.
Far larger than any ordinary wolf. They circled the shelter.
Once. Twice.
3 times. Elara's blood went cold. The cubs appeared behind her. Rowan whispered a name. Nightfang. Elara turned. What is that? Rowan's eyes were filled with terror. My father said it was dead. A branch snapped. Elara looked into the darkness. 2 pale eyes appeared between the trees. Then a massive black wolf stepped into the moonlight. Its body was scarred, ancient. Its eyes fixed immediately on the 3 cubs. Elara moved in front of them. The creature growled. The forest seemed to hold its breath. And Elara suddenly understood. Whatever had been hunting the royal bloodline, it had found the heirs. Kaelen had never ridden so hard. Snow struck his face like shards of glass. Behind him, soldiers struggled to keep pace, but he barely noticed. Every second mattered. His children were somewhere beyond the northern forest. With Elara, the woman he had condemned, the woman he had convinced himself was a threat. The woman whose face had remained in his mind long after the gates closed behind her. He hated himself for remembering the way she had looked at him. Not angry, not pleading, just disappointed. That expression followed him through the storm. Then his lead hunter raised a hand. Tracks. 3 small wolves. Kaelen dismounted. He touched the snow.
Fresh.
His pulse hammered. They're close. Then came a roar. Not a wolf's howl. Something deeper. Older. The horses panicked. Kaelen drew his sword. Move. His soldiers followed. The trees opened. The ruined lodge appeared. And Kaelen saw her. Elara stood between a massive black wolf and his children. Her body was shaking. Her dress was torn. Blood ran down one arm. But she did not move. The creature lunged. Elara screamed. Not from fear.
From rage.
Her wolf exploded from within her. Silver light raced beneath her skin. Her eyes flashed. For one impossible moment, Kaelen saw an Omega he had never known existed. She struck the creature. The impact sent both wolves across the snow. The soldiers froze. Kaelen's sword lowered. Elara rose again. The ancient wolf circled. Then its claws cut her shoulder. Blood fell onto the snow. Silver. Kaelen's breath caught. The blood began glowing. Ancient symbols appeared across Elara's skin. Symbols Kaelen had seen only in forbidden royal manuscripts. The Nightfang recoiled. Then Kaelen charged. His wolf erupted through him. The fight became chaos.
Claws. Snow. Steel.
Howls. Kaelen drove his sword into the creature's shoulder. It screamed and disappeared into the trees. Silence returned. Kaelen immediately turned. His children ran toward him, but they stopped halfway, because Elara had collapsed. Kaelen crossed the distance in seconds. He dropped beside her. His hands hovered over her body. He wanted to touch her. He was afraid to. Elara. Her eyes opened. She looked at him. There was no warmth in them. Only exhaustion. You came. Kaelen swallowed. Where are the children? She looked toward the cubs. Safe. The youngest ran back to her. Not him. Kaelen felt something inside his chest crack. He looked at Aiden. Come here. Aiden shook his head. Then Rowan stepped forward. You sent her away. Kaelen froze. Rowan's small voice trembled. You made her leave. Kaelen had faced armies, assassins, rival kings. Nothing had ever wounded him like those words. He looked at Elara. She turned her face away. And suddenly he understood. His children had not followed a traitor. They had followed the only person who made them feel safe. Kaelen stood. Take the cubs. The guards approached. The children refused. Aiden clung to Elara.
No.
Kaelen's voice softened. I am not hurting her. Rowan stared at him. You already did. The king had no answer. They returned to Moonfang under heavy guard. But before Elara entered the fortress, Seraphine was waiting. Her eyes immediately found the silver markings. For the first time, genuine fear crossed her face. She recovered quickly. The court will need an explanation. Kaelen looked at her. Then give them one. Seraphine smiled. I will. Hours later, Elara stood before the royal council. The silver markings still faintly glowed across her skin. An elderly historian approached. He saw them. His face drained of color. Then he fell to his knees. My queen. The entire chamber went silent. Elara stared at him. Kaelen turned. What did you call her? The old man lifted his trembling head. The Moonborn Queen. His voice barely carried. The Omega who will save the royal bloodline. He swallowed. Or destroy it. And across the chamber, Seraphine's hand quietly tightened around the edge of the throne. Her plan had just become a war. The palace changed after the prophecy. Whispers moved through every corridor. The Omega was no longer merely an exile. She was a possibility, a threat, a miracle, a future queen. Kaelen moved Elara into the royal wing. Officially, it was for her protection. Unofficially, he could no longer bear the thought of losing sight of her. Their rooms were separated by only one corridor. Every night, Kaelen heard footsteps outside her door. Every morning, he found himself looking for her. And Elara noticed. She also hated that she noticed. Their bond had become impossible to ignore. Whenever Kaelen entered the room, her wolf stirred. Whenever Elara was frightened, his wolf became restless. It was not peace. It was hunger, recognition, a pull neither of them could control. One night, Kaelen found her standing beside the window. Moonlight touched her face. You should sleep. She did not turn. I don't trust you enough to sleep. The words stopped him. Kaelen looked down. I deserve that. Elara finally faced him. Why did you do it? He knew what she meant. The evidence. His jaw tightened. Because I was afraid. Of me? Of losing them. He stepped closer. Years ago, I trusted someone. They used my weakness against me. I lost someone I loved because I believed the wrong person. Elara's expression softened slightly. But you did it again. Kaelen closed his eyes. Yes. The king who commanded armies stood before her without a crown. I was wrong. Silence stretched between them. Elara wanted to forgive him. That frightened her more than anger. Because beneath all the pain, the bond remained. Then, a scream tore through the palace. One of the cubs was missing. Kaelen's entire body changed. He became the king again. Guards flooded the corridors. A broken window, blood on the floor, and, beside it, another piece of Elara's clothing. Kaelen stared. His old fear returned. Seraphine appeared behind him. Her voice was soft. Your Majesty. He turned toward Elara. She was standing at the end of the corridor. His eyes hardened. For one terrible second, she saw the same man who had exiled her. The same doubt. The same judgment. No, Elara whispered. Kaelen's silence was worse than an accusation. Her heart broke. Again. But this time she refused to beg. If you believe I took him. She slowly stepped backward. Then arrest me. Kaelen's hands clenched. He wanted to believe her. But the evidence was everywhere. Elara turned. She walked away. The remaining cubs followed her. Kaelen watched them disappear. Then he saw something on the floor. A tiny silver thread. Not Elara's. Royal magic. He picked it up. His wolf reacted violently. Kaelen looked toward Seraphine. She had gone pale. For the first time, suspicion entered his mind. Not toward Elara. Toward the woman who had been standing beside his throne for years. He turned sharply. Where is the missing cub? Seraphine hesitated. Kaelen's voice dropped. Where?
She ran.
Kaelen followed. But beneath the palace, another door had already opened. Seraphine carried the kidnapped cub into a chamber older than Moonfang itself. Ancient symbols covered the walls. The child screamed. Seraphine placed her hand against a sealed stone door. You were always more useful than you knew. The seal began glowing. Deep beneath the kingdom, something moved. Something enormous. Kaelen reached the empty corridor too late. Elara had disappeared. And so had the other two cubs. He looked at the darkness ahead. This time, he did not order soldiers to drag her back. He followed. Not as king. Not as judge. As the man who had finally realized that if he lost her again, there might be nothing left of him worth saving. Beneath Moonfang, the air smelled of blood and ancient stone. Elara followed the faint silver trail through tunnels forgotten by the royal family. The two cubs stayed close. Their wolves were frightened, but they trusted her. That trust kept her moving. At the end of the tunnel stood a massive circular chamber. Seraphine was there. So was the missing cub. He was trapped inside a glowing circle. Elara stopped. Let him go. Seraphine laughed softly. You still think this is about the children? She gestured toward the chamber. This kingdom was built on a lie. The ancient symbols began glowing. Seraphine explained what the royal archives had hidden. The first Moonfang rulers had not conquered the ancient force. They had sealed it, and the seal required royal blood. The three cubs were not merely heirs. They were keys. Elara's stomach turned. You used them. I used what the kingdom gave me. Seraphine's eyes hardened. And you were never supposed to discover what you are. The chamber shook. The creature beneath the kingdom awakened. Elara felt its pain, its rage, its hunger. Then something inside her answered. Her healing gift surged through her body. Silver light exploded from her hands. The corrupted magic around the cub shattered. The child fell free. Elara caught him. The other cubs rushed forward. Seraphine screamed. You cannot control it. Elara looked at the darkness. I don't need to control it. She understood. Her gift had never been about destroying pain. It was about taking pain into herself and transforming it. The ancient force was not merely evil. It was wounded, abandoned,
Trapped.
just like her. Elara stepped toward it. Then the chamber doors exploded. Kaelen entered with the royal guard. His eyes found Elara. Then the children. Then Seraphine. Everything became clear. Kaelen's face turned cold. You. Seraphine stepped backward. Your Majesty. How long? She said nothing. Kaelen's voice became deadly. How long did you manipulate me? Seraphine smiled. Long enough. The guards moved. Seraphine unleashed the chamber's magic. Half the soldiers turned against Kaelen. Steel rang against steel. The fortress became a battlefield. Kaelen fought through his own guards. Elara protected the cubs. Then Seraphine struck. A blade of dark magic flew toward Elara. Kaelen stepped between them. The impact threw him across the stone floor. Kaelen! Elara ran toward him. He looked up. Blood covered his mouth. But he smiled faintly. "You're still here." She dropped beside him. "You idiot." His fingers touched hers. "I finally learned." He pushed himself upright. Then, before the entire court, the Alpha King dropped to one knee. Not in surrender. In recognition. "I chose fear over you." His voice echoed through the chamber. "I chose the crown over the truth." Elara's eyes filled with tears. Kaelen looked at the court. "And I was wrong." The nobles stared. Seraphine's control began collapsing. But the ancient seal was already breaking. Stone cracked. The floor trembled. Something roared beneath them. Elara looked down. The silver markings on her skin burned brighter. She understood what had to happen. The seal needed her. Kaelen saw the realization in her eyes.
No.
She stepped away. "Kaelen." "No." His voice cracked. For the first time, the king sounded terrified. Elara looked at the three cubs.
Then at him.
She smiled through tears. "If I don't go." The chamber shook. Moonfang began collapsing above them. Elara turned toward the darkness. Kaelen reached for her. She stepped beyond his hand and walked into the awakening night. The ancient chamber opened like a wound. Darkness poured through the cracks. In the stone, above them, Moonfang shook. Windows shattered. Towers groaned. The entire kingdom felt the awakening beneath its foundations. Elara stood at the center of the chamber. Silver light surrounded her. The ancient force rose before her. It had no true shape, only shadows.
Eyes. Claws.
And thousands of years of rage. Elara could feel its pain. It was not asking to conquer. It was asking to be released. But if she released it, Moonfang would die. Her life was tied to the seal. She knew what the choice meant. Kaelen ran toward her. "Stop." Elara turned. "You can't come closer." "I don't care. You'll die."
He stopped.
The old Kaelen would have commanded her. The old king would have ordered soldiers to restrain her. But the man standing there was different. He lowered his weapon.
He removed his crown
and placed it on the ground. "I don't want a queen who obeys me." Elara stared at him. "I want you alive." Her breath trembled. Kaelen stepped closer. "So, trust me." The words were simple, but they carried everything. Every mistake, every apology, every wound, every moment he had failed her. Elara closed her eyes. The three cubs approached. Their tiny paws touched the silver circle. Power surged. Kaelen stepped inside. His alpha wolf emerged. Not in dominance. In submission to the bond. The three cubs joined him. Elara opened her eyes. For the first time, the prophecy became clear. It had never been about an Omega destroying the royal bloodline. It had been about the royal bloodline learning that power without trust would eventually destroy itself. Elara raised her hands. Silver light flooded the chamber. Kaelen's strength joined hers. The cubs' wolves howled. The ancient creature screamed. Then its rage transformed. Darkness became silver. The cracks sealed. The chamber fell silent. Seraphine stared in horror.
No.
Her manipulation had failed. The nobles witnessed everything. The forged evidence. The kidnapping. The ancient chamber. The truth. Seraphine was taken away. But Elara did not notice. She was falling. Kaelen caught her before she struck the ground. Elara. No response. Her silver markings faded. Her body became still. The king held her against his chest.
No.
His voice broke. He had survived wars. He had buried people he loved. He had endured years of loneliness. But this was different. This was the one person he had finally learned to love. And he had found her only to lose her. The cubs gathered around her. Aiden began crying. Then he placed his tiny paw against Elara's hand. A silver spark appeared. Kaelen froze. Another glow. Then another. Elara inhaled sharply. Her eyes opened. Kaelen closed his eyes and pressed his forehead against hers. She whispered, "You were afraid." He laughed through tears. Terrified. For the first time, Elara saw no king before her. Only a broken man. A man who had finally surrendered the thing he had guarded most fiercely. Control. Months later, Moonfang changed. Seraphine's name became a warning. The Royal Council was rebuilt. The old laws against Omegas were abolished. And Elara stood beside Kaelen before the entire kingdom. A crown waited in his hands. But he did not place it on her. Instead, he looked into her eyes. "Do you choose this?" Elara understood. He was giving her something he had never given anyone.
Choice.
She smiled. "I choose you." Kaelen placed the crown upon her head. The kingdom bowed, not because she was the most powerful Omega, but because she had saved them when they had abandoned her. Years later, the 3 Alpha Cubs still followed Elara everywhere, even into the gardens, even into the throne room, even when she tried to have a moment alone with the king. At sunset, the 3 young wolves slept beside her beneath the old tree where she had once believed herself completely alone. Kaelen stood nearby. Elara looked toward him. The feared Alpha King smiled, not because he had conquered another kingdom, not because his enemies were defeated, not because the crown rested safely upon his head. He smiled because the woman he had once watched walk into exile had become the heart of his world. And beside her slept the 3 children who had followed her into the darkness. Because even before the king understood who she was, they already knew. She was home.